The small town of Mapleton, nestled between rolling hills in rural Massachusetts, had long since accepted that the old Victorian house at the end of Willow Street would remain a monument to bitterness. Its owner, Kyle Richardson, a man of 53 with salt and pepper hair and permanently furrowed brows, had been a fixture of isolation for nearly 5 years now. The townsfolk remembered when he'd been different, the high school English teacher who organized community theater productions and summer reading programs at the local library. That was before the factory closure that devastated the town's economy, before the town council's desperate decision that sold off the historic Richardson property, land that had been in Cale's family for generations, to a development company that promptly went bankrupt, leaving nothing but broken promises and Cale's shattered trust. "He's at the window again," muttered Mrs. Finch to her husband as they drove past on their way to church. "Just watching like some sort of ghost haunting his own life." From behind the weather-worn curtains, Kyle observed the Sunday morning procession of vehicles. Neighbors who once sought his company now averting their eyes when passing his property. The betrayal had calcified around his heart, transforming a once gregarious educator into a recluse who ventured out only for absolute necessities. The interior of his home reflected his mental state. Books once meticulously organized now gathered dust on shelves, family photographs turned face down, the piano in the corner silent and untuned. His retirement savings sustained his minimal existence, and his garden provided vegetables during warmer months. He needed nothing from them, the town that had sold his birthright for a development that never came. 2 streets over, in a modest apartment above the town's only bakery, 28-year-old Ilara Winters kneaded dough with practiced hands. The morning sunlight illuminated her kitchen, catching on the copper pots hanging above her small stove and the collection of herbs growing in mismatched containers along the windowsill. Unlike most of Mapleton's younger residents, Ilara had returned after college, drawn back by her widowed grandmother's declining health. After her grandmother's passing last year, something kept Ilara rooted to the town that others her age couldn't escape fast enough. "You really think this is worth your time?" asked Mira, Ilara's roommate and childhood friend, watching from the doorway as Ilara prepared a container of beef stew. "He hasn't said a word to you in, 3 months of leaving food?" Ilara tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, leaving a smudge of flour on her cheek. "It's not about gratitude, Mira. You didn't see him at the memorial service last year, standing in the back, looking like the last person on earth. That was his choice," Mira pointed out, reaching for her car keys. "Just like it's his choice to be the town hermit." "Maybe," Ilara conceded, sealing the container. "But nobody chooses to be that alone. Sometimes people just forget how to find their way back." What Ilara didn't say, couldn't articulate even to herself, was that something in Cale's isolation resonated with a fear she carried, that grief could transform you into someone unrecognizable, even to yourself. She had watched her grandmother slowly withdraw after her grandfather's death, had felt herself teetering on a similar edge after losing both grandparents who had raised her. That afternoon, as gathering clouds signaled an approaching autumn storm, Ilara made her usual walk to the Victorian house. The ritual was always the same. She would place the container on the porch, knock twice, and retreat to the sidewalk. Sometimes she'd wait, sometimes not. Today, with the wind picking up and the temperature dropping, she lingered longer than usual, watching as the curtain moved slightly. "It's beef stew," she called out, loud enough to be heard through the door. "My grandmother's recipe. Storm's coming in. Thought you might like something warm." No response came, but she hadn't expected one. Ilara pulled her jacket tighter around herself and turned to leave when the door creaked open, just enough for Cale to peer out with suspicious eyes. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. The question caught her off guard. After months of silence, the single word hung between them like a challenge. "Because everyone deserves a home-cooked meal," she answered simply. Kyle's expression hardened. "I don't want your charity or your pity. It's not either of those things." "Then what is it?" Ilara considered her answer carefully. Maybe it's just that I believe people shouldn't have to carry their burdens alone. Did the town council put you up to this? Some community outreach to the crazy old man? His voice held decades of resentment. Let me save you some time, Miss Winters. I know who you are. I remember your grandparents. Good people, unlike the vultures running this town. Nobody put me up to anything, Mr. Richardson. Then you're wasting your time. I don't need saving, and I certainly don't need handouts. He gestured at the container. Take it back. I'll leave it, she said firmly. Eat it or throw it away. That's your choice. The first heavy raindrops began to fall as Kyle's face disappeared behind the closing door. The container remained on the porch, and Ilara hurried away as the skies opened. Behind his curtain, Kyle watched her retreating figure, a mixture of irritation and something uncomfortably like shame stirring within him. Later that night, as rain lashed against his windows and thunder rolled across the valley, Kyle stepped onto his porch. The container sat where she had left it, collecting rainwater around its edges. He should leave it there. Let the storm wash away this unwanted gesture like everything else. Instead, his hand reached out and he brought the container inside. The container of beef stew sat untouched on Kyle's kitchen counter for 2 days, a silent reminder of an interaction he'd rather forget. Each time he passed it, his stubbornness renewed. He would not be won over by some misguided attempt at community rehabilitation. When he finally disposed of it, emptying the contents into his compost bin behind the house, he felt a grim satisfaction. October settled over Mapleton with a painter's touch, transforming green hills into a tapestry of crimson and gold. Kyle watched the transformation from his porch chair, bundled against the morning chill with a threadbare quilt, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. His daily newspaper lay folded and unread. The town's gossip and politics no longer held his interest. Despite his resolve, Ilara continued her ritual. Every third day, precisely at 5:30 p.m., she would arrive with a new container: lasagna, chicken soup, shepherd's pie, and every third day he would wait until she left before retrieving it, only to dispose of it later. It became an unspoken game between them, one he was determined not to lose by acknowledging her persistence. "You're the most stubborn man I've ever encountered," Ilara declared one evening, breaking their unspoken rule by speaking when she knew he was listening from behind his door. "And that's saying something, because my grandfather once spent 3 days on a roof, refusing to come down until the town approved his permit for solar panels." The unexpected anecdote and the matter-of-fact way she delivered it almost pulled a smile from Kyle's lips. He remained silent, but his hand rested against the door, feeling the vibrations of her voice. "Chicken pot pie today," she continued, "and before you throw it away without trying it, you should know I had to fight Mrs. Peterson at the market for the last package of frozen peas. That woman is terrifying. She teaches 3rd grade and has a grip like a vice." When Kyle retrieved the container that evening, he opened it and examined the contents before disposing of them. A small concession, he told himself, meant nothing. At the Mapleton Community Center, Ilara volunteered 3 evenings a week teaching cooking classes. What had begun as a temporary position while job hunting had evolved into a passion project, especially her Tuesday class for teenagers and her Thursday sessions for seniors learning to cook for one. "You seem distracted today," observed Walter Jenkins, a 72-year-old widower struggling to master a simple omelette. "That Richardson fellow still giving you trouble?" Ilara smiled, gently correcting Walter's aggressive whisking technique. "He's not giving me trouble. He's just persistent in his isolation. That business with his family's land was badly handled," Walter acknowledged, his eyes fixed on the mixing bowl. "Town council thought they were saving jobs, but they were careless with a legacy. Sometimes when you've lost something precious, it's easier to lose everything else too." "Is that how it was for you?" Ilara asked softly, knowing Walter had withdrawn from most social activities after his wife's death 3 years ago. "For a while," he admitted. "Margaret was my whole world for 46 years. When she went, I didn't see the point in casseroles or book clubs or dawn fishing trips." He poured the egg mixture into the heated pan. Then my granddaughter signed me up for your cooking class, and I remembered that hunger isn't just for food. That conversation lingered with Ilara as she prepared her next offering for Kyle. Her apartment kitchen window framed the twilight settling over Mapleton's main street, the hardware store closing for the evening, teenagers congregating outside the ice cream parlor despite the chill, Mr. Abernathy walking his ancient golden retriever at exactly the same time as every day for the past decade. Her hands worked methodically, chopping herbs and measuring spices with the practiced ease of someone who finds solace in culinary creation. Tonight's dish was special, not because of its complexity, but because of its simplicity. A chicken and rice casserole with a particular blend of herbs that her grandmother had taught her, claiming it was medicine for the homesick heart. Ding, as the casserole baked, filling her apartment with an aromatic blend of rosemary, thyme, and sage, Ilara considered Walter's words about hunger beyond food. Perhaps that explained her persistence with Kale, recognition of a starvation deeper than the physical, a conviction that some connections needed to be preserved even when they seemed one-sided. By the time she arrived at Kale's Victorian house, night had fully descended, bringing with it a biting wind that promised the first frost of the season. She placed the still warm container on the porch and knocked her customary twice. When no movement came from inside, she sighed and turned to leave. "You're later than usual," came Kyle's voice as the door opened slightly. Ilara turned back, surprised to find him partially visible in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from inside. "The casserole took longer to bake than I expected." Kyle nodded once, his eyes moving to the container, then back to her face. "You've been doing this for almost 4 months now. Has it been that long?" she asked, though she knew precisely how long it had been, 17 weeks and 3 days. "Why haven't you given up?" The question held genuine curiosity beneath its gruff delivery. Ilara considered several possible answers before settling on the truth. "My grandmother always said that the people who push everyone away are usually the ones who need connection most. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I'm as stubborn as you are." For a moment, something shifted in Kyle's expression. A momentary softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his perpetually tense shoulders. Then as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. "Good night, Miss Winters," he said, reaching down to take the container, the first time he had accepted it directly from her hands. "Ilara," she corrected gently. "Good night, Mr. Richardson." As she walked home through the darkened streets of Mapleton, Ilara felt a small victory in that simple exchange. What she couldn't know was that behind his closed door, Kale Richardson stood motionless, holding the warm container and experiencing the first crack in the wall he had built around himself. November arrived with a vengeance, bringing the first significant snowfall of the season and temperatures that sent even the hardiest New Englanders retreating to fireplaces and heated blankets. Kyle's aging furnace struggled against the cold, forcing him to resurrect the wood stove in his living room, unused since his father's time. The physical labor of chopping and stacking wood provided a welcome distraction from the increasing difficulty of maintaining his isolation. In the weeks since he had directly accepted Ilara's container, something had shifted. Though he still disposed of most of her offerings without tasting them, he found himself watching for her arrival, occasionally even acknowledging her with a nod or brief word. These minor concessions to human connection disturbed him in their comfort. "You should come to the Winter Festival this weekend," Ilara suggested one particularly bitter evening, her cheeks flushed from the cold, snowflakes catching in her hair. "They're lighting the town square, and the community center will have warm drinks and music." "I don't do festivals," Kyle replied flatly, accepting the container, today holding what appeared to be a vegetable lasagna. "It might surprise you how many people would be glad to see you there." Kyle's expression hardened. "The same people who voted to sell my family's land, who watched as 5 generations of Richardson history was traded for empty promises. That was 5 years ago, Mr. Richardson. Some of those council members aren't even on the board anymore. Doesn't change what happened. Ilara sighed, her breath visible in the cold air between them. No, it doesn't, but neither does staying angry forever. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her boots leaving a trail of footprints in the fresh snow. Kyle watched her go, the familiar bitterness rising like bile in his throat, yet somehow less potent than before. Inside, he placed the container on his kitchen counter and resumed his evening routine, stoking the wood stove, making a cup of tea, settling into his reading chair with a dog-eared copy of Steinbeck. But tonight, the words failed to capture his attention. His gaze kept drifting to the container, to the window, to the snow-covered street beyond. In town, preparations for the winter festival consumed everyone's attention. Ilara found herself volunteering additional hours at the community center, helping to coordinate the potluck dinner that would follow the lighting ceremony. As she reviewed the sign-up sheet, checking which dishes were still needed, Mira appeared at her elbow. "No luck convincing the hermit to join civilization?" she asked, helping herself to a cookie from the plate Ilara had brought for the volunteers. "He's not a hermit," Ilara corrected automatically. "He's just a recluse, a misanthrope, the town's very own Boo Radley. Wounded," Ilara finished quietly. "He's wounded and doesn't know how to heal." Mira studied her friend with sudden seriousness. "You know, when you first started this food delivery crusade, I thought it was just your usual fix everyone impulse. But this is different, isn't it?" Ilara concentrated on the sign-up sheet, avoiding Mira's perceptive gaze. "I'm not trying to fix him. I just think everyone deserves a second chance at community." "Uh-huh," Mira responded skeptically. "And the fact that you've been talking about him constantly for months has nothing to do with those soulful blue eyes or that distinguished silver hair." "I have not been talking about him constantly," Ilara protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "And his eyes are grey, not blue." Mira's triumphant smile said everything her silence didn't. The night of the winter festival arrived with perfect weather, cold enough to preserve the snow, but clear-skied and windless. The town square transformed under strings of white lights, with bonfires strategically placed for warmth. Children darted between adults, their laughter rising like steam into the night air. Local musicians played familiar carols from a small stage, and the scent of cinnamon and pine permeated everything. Ilara moved through the crowd, helping to organize the buffet tables inside the community center. Her gaze occasionally drifted to the entrance, though she told herself she wasn't looking for anyone in particular. When Walter Jenkins appeared at her side, offering a mug of hot cider, she accepted gratefully. "Your cooking classes saved my Thanksgiving," he informed her proudly. "Made a whole dinner for my son's family. First time since Margaret passed. My granddaughter actually took seconds of my mashed potatoes." "That's wonderful," Ilara smiled, genuinely pleased. "How does it feel?" Walter considered the question, his weathered face thoughtful, like putting on an old favorite sweater you thought was lost for good. Comfortable, but a little unfamiliar at first. He glanced toward the door. "No sign of your project?" "He's not a project," Ilara said, echoing her earlier defense to Mira. "And no, I didn't really expect him to come." As the evening progressed and the lighting ceremony concluded, Ilara found herself helping in the community center kitchen, overseeing the rotation of dishes on the buffet. The hall was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, students from her cooking classes, local business owners, all connected by the invisible threads of small-town life. When she emerged from the kitchen with a fresh tray of cornbread, she nearly collided with a tall figure standing awkwardly just inside the entrance. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Kyle Richardson looked different somehow, less severe in a dark blue sweater and with his hair combed neatly, holding a ceramic dish with uncertain hands. "Mr. Richardson," she managed, recovering from her surprise. "You came." "Apparently," he replied, his discomfort evident in his rigid posture. I brought something." He gestured to the dish, which appeared to contain some kind of cobbler. You didn't have to do that, Ilara said, genuinely touched by the gesture. My mother's recipe, he explained stiffly. Blackberry cobbler. Haven't made it in years, so it might be terrible. Ilara led him to the dessert table, aware of the curious glances and whispers following their progress. I'm sure it's wonderful. Thank you for bringing it, and for coming tonight. Kyle nodded, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of wariness and something that might have been nostalgia. Place hasn't changed much, same decorations they've been using since I was a kid. Some traditions are worth preserving, Ilara observed, watching his reaction carefully. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Maybe so. The evening unfolded with a surreal quality for Kale. Initial awkwardness gave way to cautious conversations, first with Walter Jenkins, who remembered Kale from his teaching days, then with others who approached with varying degrees of surprise at his presence. Some interactions were strained, weighted with unspoken history, but others held a warmth he had forgotten existed in his connection to this place. By the time the crowd began to thin, Kyle found himself seated at a table with Ilara and a small group of her friends, listening to stories of the town's recent events, the renovation of the old mill into apartments, the high school drama club's production of Our Town, the ongoing debate about expanding the library. Your cobbler was the first dessert to disappear? Ilara informed him as they helped clean up the community center. You might get recruited for the spring bake-off if you're not careful. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, he cautioned, but without the bitterness that would have accompanied such a statement months ago. As they walked back toward their respective homes, the night sky brilliant with stars above them, Kyle cleared his throat. I've been throwing away your food, he admitted abruptly. Ilara's laughter surprised him. I know. You knew. Mr. Richardson, you live alone and your garbage can is at the side of your house. It wasn't exactly detective work. She smiled, her breath creating clouds in the cold air. Did you think I believed you were eating 3-day-old lasagna? For the first time in her presence, perhaps for the first time in years, Kale laughed, a short, rusty sound but genuine. I suppose that wasn't very logical of me. The food was never really the point anyway, she said quietly. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the corner where their paths would diverge. Kyle hesitated, words forming and dissolving before he could speak them. Thank you, he finally said, for not giving up. Ilara's smile in response held a warmth that stayed with him long after they had parted ways, a small flame against the winter cold. December brought shorter days and longer nights, transforming Mapleton into a postcard image of New England winter. The Victorian house at the end of Willow Street no longer appeared quite so forbidding. Curtains were often open during daylight hours, and smoke curled consistently from the chimney, suggesting habitation rather than haunting. Kale Richardson still wasn't what anyone would call sociable, but subtle changes marked his gradual reintegration into community life. He had begun stopping at Brewster's Market for his groceries rather than driving to the anonymous supermarket one town over. He occasionally lingered at the post office, exchanging brief pleasantries with whoever happened to be there. Most notably, he had attended the high school's winter concert, sitting in the back row, but visibly present, nodding approval at his former students, now grown into music teachers and program directors. Ilara continued her food deliveries, but the dynamic had shifted. Now, she often stayed for a cup of tea, their conversations growing from awkward exchanges to something approaching friendship. Sometimes, he even ate the food in her presence, a milestone neither acknowledged aloud but both recognized. I found these while cleaning out the attic, Kyle said one evening, placing a stack of yellowed papers on the kitchen table between them. Thought you might be interested. Ilara carefully examined what proved to be handwritten recipes, the ink faded but still legible. Are these your mother's? Kyle nodded, watching as she handled them with reverence. Some are even older, my grandmother's, and I think a few came from her mother, family recipes going back almost 100 years. This is incredible, Ilara murmured, reading ingredients and notes in different handwritings across generations. A real culinary heritage. They've just been gathering dust, he said with affected casualness that didn't quite mask the significance of the gesture. Thought someone who would actually use them should have them. Ilara looked up from the recipes, meeting his eyes. I couldn't take these, Mr. Richardson. They belong in your family. Kyle, he corrected, the first time he had offered his first name. And I'm giving them to you, unless you're not interested. Of course I'm interested, she assured him quickly. But these are precious family heirlooms. Without someone to cook them, they're just paper, he said quietly. My mother would have liked knowing they were being used again, especially by someone who understands food the way you do. The compliment, so casually delivered, brought unexpected warmth to Ilara's cheeks. Thank you. I'll take good care of them, and I'll make copies so you can keep the originals. As Christmas approached, Ilara found herself absorbed in preparations for the holiday cooking class she was offering at the community center, a special session teaching traditional holiday dishes from around the world. The recipes from Kyle's family had inspired her to focus on the theme of food as heritage, as memory, as connection. The evening of the class arrived with a fresh snowfall that transformed Mapleton into a scene from a holiday film. Ilara arrived early to prepare the demonstration station, arranging ingredients and checking equipment. When the door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and a familiar tall figure, her surprise must have shown on her face. You mentioned it last week, Kyle explained, unwinding his scarf. Said anyone was welcome. Of course, she recovered quickly. I just didn't expect... I'm happy you're here. As other participants arrived, a mixture of regular students and newcomers drawn by the holiday theme, Ilara noticed the varied reactions to Kyle's presence. Curiosity, surprise, and in some cases, a lingering wariness characterized the interactions. Yet as the class progressed, these tensions dissolved in the shared experience of creating something together. Ilara moved between stations, offering guidance and encouragement. When she reached Kyle, who was attempting to shape dough for Finnish pulla bread, she found herself smiling at his methodical approach, the English teacher's precision applied to baking. You're good at this, she observed, watching him work the dough with surprisingly confident hands. I used to help my mother in the kitchen, he replied, not looking up. Before she got sick, she said I had a knack for bread, something about patient hands. It was the most he had ever volunteered about his past, and Ilara recognized the significance. She was right, she said, simply, letting the moment breathe without pressing for more. After the class, as participants departed with containers of their creations, Kyle lingered, helping to clean up the community center kitchen. I have something for you, Ilara said when they had finished, retrieving a package from her bag. An early Christmas gift. Kyle accepted the neatly wrapped package with evident discomfort. I didn't get you anything. That's not how gifts work, she reminded him gently. No reciprocity required. He unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Ilara's neat handwriting. What is this? I transcribed all your family recipes, she explained. Added notes about modern equivalents for some of the older ingredients, suggestions for adaptations. The originals are safe, but I thought you might like a working copy for yourself. Kyle leafed through the pages, recognition and something deeper crossing his features as he encountered dishes from his childhood rendered in fresh ink. This must have taken hours. I enjoyed it, she said truthfully. It was like having a conversation with your family across time. The heavy silence that followed held more meaning than any response could have conveyed. 2 days before Christmas, during a particularly fierce snowstorm that had knocked out power to half the town, Ilara found herself trudging through knee-deep snow toward the Victorian house. The community center had been established as a warming station, and despite Mira's objections about risking the journey, Ilara couldn't shake her concern for Kyle alone in the old house, with its questionable wiring and aging furnace. When she finally reached his porch, half frozen and questioning her own judgment, the door opened before she could knock. Are you insane? Kyle demanded, ushering her inside with uncharacteristic urgency. "It's a whiteout out there. The power's out across town," she explained through chattering teeth. "The community center has generators. I thought you might need somewhere warm to go." Kyle shook his head in disbelief as he guided her toward the wood stove, which radiated blessed heat. "So you decided to risk hypothermia on the off chance I might be cold?" "It sounds silly when you put it that way," she admitted, holding her hands toward the fire. "Completely irrational," he agreed, disappearing into another room and returning with a blanket that he draped around her shoulders. "The power's still on here. Old houses have their advantages sometimes. The lines to this part of town are underground." And as Ilara warmed up, she became aware of something unexpected, a rich, complex aroma filling the house. "Are you cooking?" A look that might almost have been embarrassment crossed Kyle's face. "I was attempting to. One of the recipes from the book you made. My mother's beef bourguignon." "Really?" Ilara couldn't hide her delight. "How is it turning out?" "Impossible to say. It's been simmering for hours and I'm still not sure if I've ruined it or not." Ilara smiled. "There's only one way to find out." In Kyle's kitchen, cleaner and more organized than she had imagined, Ilara watched as he lifted the lid from a heavy cast-iron pot. The rich aroma intensified, bringing with it an expression on Kyle's face she had never seen before, a vulnerable openness, a momentary transportation to another time. "It smells right," he said quietly, like hers did. They ate at the kitchen table, the storm raging outside, while they remained in a pocket of warmth and light. The stew was delicious. Tender beef, perfectly balanced flavors, the comfort of generations distilled into a single dish. "Tomorrow night is Christmas Eve," Ilara said as they finished. "Mira and I are hosting a small dinner at our apartment. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. You'd be welcome to join us." Kyle considered the invitation, his hesitation visible. "I haven't done Christmas with other people since my mother died. 15 years now." "No pressure," she assured him. "The invitation stands either way." When the storm finally subsided and Ilara prepared to leave, Kyle insisted on walking her home. The streets now passable, though still deep with snow, they walked in companionable silence, their breaths creating clouds in the cold night air until they reached her apartment building. "Thank you for checking on me," Kyle said as they paused outside the entrance. "It was unnecessary, but appreciated." Ilara smiled. "That's what neighbors do." "Is that what we are, neighbors?" The question held layers of meaning neither was quite ready to fully examine. "For now," she answered carefully. "Good night, Kyle." Christmas Eve arrived clear and cold, stars brilliant in the darkened sky above Mapleton. Ilara's apartment transformed under her attentions, a small tree in the corner adorned with eclectic ornaments, candles on every surface. The dining table extended to accommodate 7 guests. "He's not going to come," Mira predicted as she arranged a cheese platter. "You know that, right?" "Maybe not," Ilara conceded, checking the roasting chicken. "But I think he might surprise us." The first guests arrived. Walter Jenkins with his son's family, then a couple who had taken Ilara's cooking classes, filling the apartment with conversation and laughter. Ilara found herself glancing toward the door with increasing frequency as the evening progressed, trying to suppress her disappointment. When the knock finally came, nearly an hour after the invited time, she opened the door to find Kyle standing awkwardly in the hallway, a bottle of wine in one hand and a familiar ceramic dish in the other. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his discomfort evident. "I almost didn't come. Then I decided to make my mother's cobbler again, and it took longer than I expected." Ilara's smile conveyed everything words couldn't. "I'm glad you're here." As she introduced him to the other guests, Ilara watched the initial stiffness in his posture gradually ease. Walter Jenkins greeted him like an old friend, and Mira, after an initial skeptical assessment, engaged him in conversation about the town's historical architecture. Dinner progressed with the organic rhythm of good food and better company. Kyle spoke little at first, but when the conversation turned to books, his passion for literature emerged, transforming him from a reluctant participant to an engaged contributor. Later, as guests lingered over dessert, including Kyle's cobbler, which earned unanimous praise. Ilara found herself beside him near the window, watching snow begin to fall softly outside. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy." He nodded, his profile illuminated by candlelight as he watched the snowfall. "The first step is always the hardest. What changed your mind about coming tonight?" Kyle was silent for a long moment before answering. "When you brought that food to my door during the storm, I realized something. I've been so focused on what this town took from me that I forgot what it gave me." He turned to face her, his expression unguarded for once. "And what it might still offer, if I'm willing to accept it." The next day, Christmas morning dawned bright and clear over Mapleton. Ilara woke early, preparing coffee and cinnamon rolls as she had every Christmas since childhood. When she opened her apartment door to retrieve the newspaper, she found a package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a hand-carved wooden spice box, its compartments labeled in Kale's precise handwriting with the names of herbs and spices, including several she had never encountered before. A note accompanied it. "For the cook who returned flavor to a life gone bland. These are the traditional spices for my mother's chicken and rice casserole, the one that reminded me of her cooking, of home, of a time before bitterness became my only companion. The first time I tasted your version, the memory hit me so powerfully I nearly passed out. It was like finding a piece of my heart I thought was lost forever. Thank you for your persistence, your kindness, and mostly for the reminder that it's never too late to begin again. Merry Christmas. Kyle." As Ilara held the spice box, tears blurring her vision, snow continued to fall outside her window, covering Mapleton in a clean white blanket. Nature's way of suggesting that even the most weather-worn landscapes can be made new again, that beneath the harshest winter lies the patient promise of spring.